Welcome to Dylan's Dialogue. Today we're talking with author, poet, and generally good guy, Josh Brown. So Josh, thanks for giving us some time here. I see that you're holding a baby.
Yep,
How
he's
old?
asleep, so
How old?
he is 15 months.
15 months?
I got another one who is 6.5. He's upstairs putting together some Legos.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that I have a 5-year-old named Azrael. He's upstairs currently drawing me a picture.
Uh-huh.
And my youngest just turned 1 October 4th, so almost 15 months. And he's upstairs napping as well.
Okay. Yeah, it's Christmas break for school, so I took this week off of work as well, and pulled this one from daycare, so
Excellent.
the boys are home together this week.
That's really nice.
Yep.
My boys get along really well. My 1-year-old's kind of a brute, you know. He likes to wrestle and he likes to pound.
Typical boy stuff.
Yeah, he's kind of a brute, but he's fun. He's a funny kid. What are their names?
The youngest is Xavier,
Sure.
and the 6-year-old upstairs is Oliver.
Excellent. So a friend of mine just had a baby and he named him Oliver, you know, but he's brand new, like 2 weeks old.
Uh-huh.
And my nephew, who's 16 now, which is hard to believe, makes me feel
Wow.
old, is Xavier.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So and she has no idea where she came up with that name, my sister. You know, she just kind of liked it.
Mm-hmm.
He has a younger brother named Jorge, and so Xavier and Jorge don't go together at all, but it seems to work for their family.
Well, Oliver is actually a family name. My father-in-law's middle name was Oliver, and his father, Oliver's great-grandfather's middle name was also Oliver. And we tossed around the idea of using that as a middle name, and I said, I kind of like that as a first name, and my wife agreed. Naming the second one was a lot harder. I kind of joke and say, we got to the end of the baby name book, we got to X's, and just got sick of flipping through the book and said, okay, Xavier's fine.
So my first son, Azrael, we did not have a name for him. You know, I had ideas and she had ideas, and we did not mesh. And it was the third day in the hospital, and they're like, you need to name this baby. Like, he's going to go as baby A in his birth certificate. Like, you need to name him. And finally, we just started reading literally through a baby book, and we were going through the A's, and I got to Azrael, and I was kind of joking, because it was a name that was perfect for me, but not so much for her.
Mm-hmm.
And she fell in love with it. It was just Hebrew enough for her, even though she's not Jewish, and just unique enough for me that it really worked out, and we enjoyed it. And then my second son came along, and we couldn't have, like, a John with an Azrael.
Right.
And so it took us a while, and we finally agreed on Malachi.
Ah. Yeah, sometimes it can be hard, but once you find it, you kind of know.
Yeah, so it's fun. It sounds like we've got pretty similar backgrounds with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's your bio? Who's Josh Brown?
Well, I'm a pretty normal guy, I guess. I grew up in northern Minnesota.
Sure.
And I went to college at the University of Minnesota, Duluth.
Excellent.
And I was actually started studying computer science there until I found out to major in computer science, you need to take 3 years of calculus.
Ooh.
And I was terrible at math. So I got a job writing at the school newspaper, the UMD Statesman, and decided that I really liked writing, and my articles were turning out good, and ended up switching my major to English. And writing and publishing has been part of my life ever since.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I was originally, who I was going to be when I grew up, I was looking at a veterinarian. I love animals, and then I discovered the math necessary to do it, and kind of to take that medical school math, and there's just a ton and I'm not any good either. I'm very, very average, and as soon as it goes in, it goes out, and so, that didn't work out.
Yeah.
So I can
the F I've ever gotten in my entire life was in Calculus 1 in college, and I retook the class and redeemed myself with a C, but after that I was like, no, it's English classes suit me much better.
Yeah, Yeah, I connected a lot better with English and social studies and stuff like that as well. I had a friend who did my physics homework for me.
Hmm.
Bless him. He's in prison now. But still, bless him.
Well, my wife's an accountant, so I joke and I say she's the numbers, I'm the words, and
You gotta be kidding.
together we make a whole person.
My wife's an accountant.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. She works as an accountant office manager for a restaurant, the same one that we met at. So yeah, I'm the writer. She's the accountant.
Yep. Funny how that works. Oh,
Yeah. It is funny how that works. Uh, so where do you work now? Because you are, I know that you write and you're quite a prolific author. You've got a lot of stuff under your belt. But you
hmm
said you took the week off of work. What do you do?
Yep. So I do have a day job. Writing doesn't do it quite full time for me.
What?
Right now, I work in book sales and distribution, actually, for a pretty nice sized company, and we do sales and distribution for about 150 or 200 independent, small to medium sized independent publishers. And it's really a great and interesting job. I get to work with all sorts of different publishers. We distribute a really wide list from literary fiction to poetry to graphic novel publishers to nonfiction type publishers. And I sort of stumbled my way into that job. I had been working in publishing mostly in the editorial and production side of things.
Sure.
After college, I worked for a magazine publisher, and he was a trade publisher he had one magazine about casinos and another magazine about industrial upholstery. So like,
Those are completely different things.
yeah, and one more, get this, cake decorating. So from there, I found my way into the book publishing world, and I worked for a nonfiction publisher who did books on automotive
Sure.
topics and civil and military aviation.
Okay.
And from there, I went to work for an audiobook publisher, which was a very interesting job and a lot of fun. And unfortunately, that company got bought out by a larger company, and I found myself out of a job. But luckily, I stumbled into my current job I have now with book sales and distribution, which, like I said, it's just a really fun and interesting job, and it's great and inspiring in a way to work with so many different kinds of independent publishers.
You know, it's really cool because it's a niche market for what you're already doing, and you get to
Mhm.
see the insides of the business a little bit, which is really hard for a lot of writers. I've discovered,
Right.
and through my own experiences as well. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes than
Yep.
putting down what you want to write on paper.
Yeah. To understand the business back end side of it is huge.
Yes. Yeah, and so you have a really good in there, and that's really nice. It's got to keep you on your toes and be really engaging for you.
Yeah, it is a lot. Like I said, and inspiring in a lot of ways too.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure you've met a lot of really cool people.
Yep. Oh yeah, all these publishers, and I mean, ranging from big to small, and a lot of them, have really great, interesting, prolific writers on their list, doing a lot of great books. Yeah.
Do you work with any of the publishers? Can you even talk about that? Is that okay?
It's I work with like I said, medium to small to largish independent publishers. One of the publishers on our list is Akashic Books,
Okay.
and they're best known for doing an adult children's book called Go the Fuck to Sleep.
I love that book.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, everyone's heard of that one, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, we work with some of the greatest poetry publishers in the country, Copper Canyon,
For sure.
Wave Poetry,
Okay.
Manic D, who's City Lights in San Francisco.
Yep.
They're known for publishing a lot of the great beat poets like Ginsberg and Kerouac back in the day. So yeah, I mean it's kind of a big deal. I mean these are really great publishers and very interesting people to know.
Yeah, and very successful. Are you signed on with any of them?
I am not, no.
Okay.
And I hesitate to sort of
Well, it might be a conflict of
my
interest.
connection in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely understand because you don't want to burn any bridges, and it might be a conflict of interest, and
Yeah,
but it keeps you in the loop and it keeps you engaged, and there's probably a lot of networking that goes on, which is really nice.
yeah, absolutely.
So, speaking of poetry, you worked with a lot of poetry publishers, and you've done a lot of poetry yourself.
A little bit, yeah.
That is something that's really interesting, and a lot of people are really engaged with. You recently won an award. Can you talk about that?
I was chosen for the Editor's Choice Award for an anthology called Lovecraft After Dark,
Yep.
and the book contains both poetry and short fiction of sort of it's of erotic Lovecraftian horror, and you
Because
know,
everybody's looking for that.
right, but it's I here I am. I never in a million years would have thought I'm announcing, oh, I'm part of an erotic horror anthology.
Right.
But there it is. I saw the call, and I had just finished working on a book with a friend of mine, Alex Ness, which was kind of a Cthulhu Lovecraftian book that contained some prose and some poetry.
Sure.
And I thought I'd give it a shot, and I kind of worked a few days on the poem, and I really like the way it turned out. It's actually one of my more favorite things that I've ever written,
Well,
and
apparently, other people.
it was received very well. They enjoyed it, so I was glad to see that they chose me for the editor's choice on that one.
Yeah, that's really cool, and congratulations on that.
Thanks. Man.
Alex Ness, I see that name a lot in the work that you do. Can you tell me a little bit about him?
Sure. Alex is a friend of mine, and I've actually met him at one of the local comic book conventions,
Sure.
SpringCon, when it was still called SpringCon. I think now they're calling it MSP Comic Con.
Yep.
And Alex is a poet and a writer, and we were actually both included in a comic book anthology um, called Mysterious Visions,
Sure.
published by Dime Store Productions. I'm not sure if they're around anymore. But we kind of got together and got talking, and he, is writing these books of poetry. And there's a couple poetry books he wrote. One was called Empire of Stone. The other one was a King Arthur one. And
Yeah.
he said, this is a lot of poetry. It could really use some short fiction. So I kind of started writing one or two short stories as sort of a backup piece
Yeah.
in these books of poetry that he was writing. So I would kind of take the world that he created through these sort of epic poems that he was writing
Sure.
and try to craft a short story set in that world.
That's actually a
And
really unique idea.
yeah, and they worked out pretty good, and we've had some success selling them at local conventions and book fairs and stuff like that. And we've the partnership has just sort of continued on through the years.
Yeah, you see a lot of it historically where they take an epic poem, like the Odyssey or
Mm-hmm.
Beowulf, and they elaborate on it and they make it something bigger and a much bigger production of it. And I think it's such a cool thing to do because people love the original concept and the work of it, and they want
Mm-hmm.
to see a bigger, wider universe built around it. And so
Right,
it's nice that you and him are able to collaborate and make something that people are probably craving.
right, right. And what we're doing is self-publishing too. And I know from my jobs in publishing throughout the years, I know about production and layout, and converting to ebooks. So that was kind of a first for him, he was self-publishing and selling his books at conventions and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And I was able to help him take it to the next level and do ebook conversions and make things available on Kindle and Nook. Not that poetry is always really the best received in ebook form. Um, Sorry, a little cough there.
you're fine.
But it's good to help him get out there a little bit more through ebooks and digital distribution.
Absolutely. And it's nice that he has a partner like you that understands that bit of a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The cough. My household had the crud for a little over a month. Children
Oh,
are a cesspool of disease.
well, this guy has had a stuffy nose for the past few days.
Yep.
He's obsessed with his little nookie. So at night he's having a hard time breathing because his nose is stuffed, but he can't sleep without his nook. So he's like wakes up every 5 minutes, and I'm running in to check on him. And
Yeah, I'm the same. So that's he loves his nook, and he loves soft blankets, and so there's so many times where because he needs one in his, so he like sleeps face down with the soft blanket over his head, and you're like, oh my god, my kid's gonna
right,
die. And then on top of it, he's got this horrible stuffy nose, and he has to have his pacifier in, and you're like, I'm gonna wake up and he's not gonna be there. Thankfully, we got through that, and now he
uh,
sleeps with blankets over his head, but he can breathe through his nose.
oh
So, when did you start writing? When did you find a passion for it?
gosh, I mean, I've been writing stories since I was a kid, since as long as I can remember. It's sort of, in high school and college, it sort of developed into writing of a lot of nonfiction.
Sure.
Like I said, I worked at the school paper. I always sort of saw myself as going into journalism.
Okay.
At the time when I was at UMD, they weren't offering journalism as a major, so I actually majored in English with a minor in communication.
Okay.
Um, but after I graduated and I got into the magazines, and I was doing less sort of journalism, nonfiction writing. I started writing a lot of comic books,
Okay.
short comic stories, and collaborating with authors, and actually enough to put together a short collection of sort of creepy Twilight Zone-ish stories.
Interesting.
And that just kind of blossomed into writing more short fiction and so on, and that's sort of how that came about.
Have you ever looked back at your old writing when you were a kid? Do you have any saved?
I don't. I can remember a few stories that I wrote. The earliest story I can remember is a story called "The Bat Who Hated Other Bats," and I wrote a story about a bat that didn't like other bats until he saw himself in the mirror one day and realized that he was a bat too. So he should start being nice to the other bats.
That sounds like a wonderful children's book.
And yeah, and I can remember my mother and grandmother sort of being, I mean, it's my mom and my grandma. Sure, they're going to be impressed with what I do, but
Sure.
From there on, my family has sort of encouraged my creativity, which
Excellent.
is nice.
Yeah, that's a really cool story, like kind of concept, and it
Hmm.
make a good children's book. Do you
Yeah.
do any children's writing?
I haven't. I guess I would be interested. I could definitely come up with some ideas. You know, finding the right kind of illustrator is would be the challenge, I guess.
Do you do
That's
any?
that's my biggest hurdle when I have ideas for comics and writing comics is, you want to find the right artist and illustrator first of all, and I mean you want to be fair and pay the artist a fair rate, which can be tough as a sort of independent creator to you know have the extra money to pay an artist.
I 100% understand. There's a few collaborations that I was involved in that were comic book related. One of them that took off for a little bit, it was called Pac Bastard, and it was about Pac-Man and being a drug addicted sociopath. And it was a lot of fun to do, but the artists, the collaborators I was working with, no names out there, notoriously unreliable.
Uh-huh.
And then with independent publishing and whatnot, I put up a lot of the finances for it, and we couldn't figure out a way financially to make it happen, and our time frames were also not going to happen.
Uh-huh.
And so we set up a lot of, we were going to be at cons and other whatnots, and we had websites laid out and developed, and it didn't work out. So
Yeah.
finding the right artist is hard. Do you do any artistry? Do you draw?
I don't. There was a point in my life a few years ago where I thought I could learn how to draw, and I just decided to keep focusing on the writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can barely draw stickmen. Nobody wants to see it, so I understand.
My son is a nice budding artist, so
Is
maybe
he?
we'll give him a few years. Maybe in about 10 years, I can be collaborating with him. So
Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be
yeah,
cool?
yeah,
Except for you might have to keep, Cthulhu After Dark away from him for a
right.
while. So you started writing fairly young, and you were obviously engaged in it. Do you have any particular reason why? What inspired you, or was it just kind of naturally in your brain?
I'm not really sure. I grew up an only child, and I played alone a lot, and I think it's just sort of a natural progression of having a large imagination.
Sure.
Making up stories, making up worlds and different play scenarios in my head, and that sort of grew into me just sort of having stories in my head that I kind of you need to get out one way or the other.
Yeah, I get it. So did you do other creative things then when you were growing up? Video games, RPGs, card games, things like that.
Not really. I grew up sort of in the beginning of the Nintendo generation.
Sure.
So, I was big on video games, and, still like to play video games. My oldest son is well, like I said, 6.5, and he's actually pretty darn good at video games already. He kicks my butt at Skylanders.
Oh, nice.
Um, yeah, so I was never really. I actually I read the Dragonlance books, but I was never really a player of Dungeons and Dragons
Sure.
or anything like that. It was just a lot of reading.
Yeah. Yeah, which is important. I've found that unless you're in kind of the niche groups and whatnot, finding readers is harder and harder to do.
Hmm.
And obviously, the networking events and working with publishers and going to cons, you're finding the people that you want to find that are reading and doing the work and that are very engaged and interesting. Uh, Family and friends, though, a little tougher.
Yeah,
Just readers seem to be a dying breed, although science says otherwise. So that more and more people are reading these days, which is really nice. I think it's really important and critical skill.
there's a lot more choices out there these days. I think
There are.
that's the tough part.
Yeah, there
So,
certainly is. It's kind of like Netflix.
yeah.
There's
So
so much to watch that you watch nothing.
yeah, and I mean that's the difficulty in being a writer, especially if you're an independent writer. Doing self-publishing and other stuff like that. You have to sort of be the one-man band where not only are you writing, but you've got to be out there, promoting yourself. And I think even if you do have a traditional publisher, these days it's more and more important for authors to be out there promoting themselves, you know, talking through blogs,
Yeah,
making appearances, just sort of getting your name and face out there is always key.
absolutely agree with you there. So you're prolific. You're an author and a writer, and they're different things. A lot of people don't understand that authors put out books and whatnot, and writers will often collaborate on different things. So be it
Mm-hmm.
television shows and plays and comic books and things like that. So you're both, which is a really unique and interesting skill that I think a lot of people don't know. Uh, but there is a huge distinguishing difference between them. You're also a poet, and you put out a lot of work. Are there more creative sides to you? What else do you do?
I think the writing pretty much covers it. And like you said, there's a lot of different kinds of writing.
Sure.
So I think that sort of satisfies the creative need. Whether I'm writing a short story or a little bit of poetry or, some nonfiction, an essay, or, just writing like a book or a movie review sometimes, fulfills that creative need to write and get something out there. So writing pretty much it. But when you get a wide variety of different types of writing, I think that helps.
Absolutely. So speaking of movies, you're a big Star Wars nerd, right?
Yes,
Did you see the new one yet?
I have seen it twice. I saw it first on opening night, and then I went back actually yesterday with my oldest son and my niece.
Sure.
and they both loved it. And yeah, I thought it was great. Really incredible movie.
I saw it opening night as well. I've got a good friend who is a regular volunteer at the Comic Cons and whatnot.
Hmm.
He's really good friends with the owner of Granite City Comics in St. Cloud, Minnesota.
Okay.
And so Granite City rented out a portion of a theater, one of the rooms, just for their friends and whatnot to screen
Wow.
Star Wars.
Wow.
So he got 3 tickets to that, a weird odd number, but he invited me and I got to bring a friend along. So we all got to see it. And it was very, very bad. It was an excellent movie, and I think that Abrams did a great job with it. And it's still relatively new, so I won't talk about any spoilers or anything.
Right.
But yeah, it was a very very good movie. I think it did justice to the original trilogy.
Sure. It corrects the mistakes of the prequels. It pays tributes to the original, but at the same time being fresh enough that it's sort of, you know, it's its own movie now.
I gotta say, I was afraid for a second of Misa Kylo Ren.
Oh,
Did you see that one YouTube video where they were talking about Jar Jar as a potential Sith Lord?
no.
You
Oh my
should look
gosh.
it up. It was very convincing. It was good. Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
Yeah,
So, you're working on some projects now, right? That are upcoming.
I am. Well, sort of ongoing is I have a comic that I'm serializing in Fantasy Scroll magazine,
Sure.
and it's called Shamrock, and it's sort of a fantasy, you know, Irish sort of influenced, which is where the name Shamrock comes from.
Right.
And my artist's name is Alberto Hernandez.
Okay.
He's actually Spanish. He lives in the Canary Islands, and he's just fantastic artist. Knocks it out of the park every time.
Awesome.
And we're serializing that 6 pages at a time
Sure.
in Fantasy Scroll, which comes out every other month. And
Okay.
actually, the new issue should be coming out, I think, Monday. And
And is
that
that
will
a
have,
hard copy or is it all digital?
it's all digital.
Okay.
And they're once a year they're coming out with an anthology. So they just came out with their year one anthology.
Okay.
And when they do their year two anthology, they will be including the first 4 parts of the Shamrock comic, which the 6 pages, 4 parts makes up chapter one.
That's awesome.
And this next
Congratulations.
issue that's coming out will be part 5, which begins chapter 2 of the comic. And it's just been a lot of fun to write. But yeah, and in addition to the Shamrock comic, I'm speaking of nonfiction. I'm writing an essay piece for a book that's going to be published by Grey House Publishing.
Okay.
A collection of essays on The Hobbit, and my essay is going to be on poems and songs found within The Hobbit.
Okay.
And the sort of the thrust of my essay is how through the poems and the songs of the Hobbit, J.R.R. Tolkien is giving identities to the different races and cultures within Middle Earth. So,
Absolutely.
it's the dwarf poetry, is structured a certain way and, has certain themes that says a lot about the dwarf race, for example. And I think, it's often overlooked, and as a poetry lover, it's something that I've always noticed that poetry throughout The Hobbit really serves to give identity to the different cultures of Middle Earth, and I think it's really interesting.
Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit really got brought to light by Peter Jackson and his films.
Right.
For decades, it's been a niche market. A lot of people really love the fantasy and the world that he built. But it really became popular throughout the films, and I don't think that a lot of people know that Tolkien was a linguist. And so he did put a tremendous amount of work and effort into the languages and the poetry and to the songs that he put in those books. And I really think those are the most critical elements of them because those were the parts that spoke most to him. And
Right.
so he built a world around what I think was most important to him, which included the poetry and songs.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. I'd be interested to read that. I'm guessing that a lot of Tolkien fans would as well.
Yeah.
When do you have that slated for completion?
The actual papers are due in April,
Sure.
and like I said, it's Grey House Publishing, and I believe their imprint is called Critical Insight,
Okay.
and they have, if you go to their website to check it out, they have other book collection essays on like Harry Potter and different sorts of cultural phenomenons like that. So,
Sure.
it, like I said, that's due April, so hopefully it should be ready sometime in the summer.
Cool.
So,
Cool.
and I got one more coming out soon. I'm not sure, from Hydra Publications.
Okay.
It's a collection of um, dystopian science fiction and fantasy stories, and my story is called Republic of Masks, which
Okay.
kind of imagines a future society where everyone wears masks to
Sure.
sort of hide from the government, but instead it sort of perverts itself, and masks become a way of identifying yourself instead of hiding yourself.
Cool.
So, like I said, that's from Hydra Publications, and I'm not quite sure when that's going to come out. I thought it was going to come out before the end of the year,
Sure.
but it looks like it's going to be early January.
Okay. Excellent. So I know that the baby's awake. I'm not going to take up too much of your time now
All right.
because it's not as peaceful anymore. So just a couple more questions, if you're okay.
Sure, yeah.
Perfect. So the people that are interested in you and your work and want to find more on my website and blog, I'm going to post this interview, and I'm also going to post the stuff that you've sent me, so the little questionnaire that I sent out. So they'll be able to have links to everything that you've done that you want to promote.
Okay,
But
great.
for the people that are interested in you and your work, where do you recommend that they turn to first? So what should they read, or should they find you?
Well, I have a sort of website blog at ninjamindcontrol.wordpress.com.
Okay.
A lot of the self-published works that I'm working on, I publish under an imprint called UFTA Press,
Yep.
and that information on that is available at uftapress.com.
And that's not Minnesotan at all.
No, not at all. And that's and I'm very active on Twitter, so
Okay.
I'm on Twitter at JoshBrown2778.
Okay.
And if people are interested in seeking me out on Facebook, I post the occasional things on Facebook as well.
Sure.
So I'm out there. So
It sounds like it. What is your wife's name? I got the kids' names, but not the wife.
Nicole.
Nicole.
Yep.
And so,
She, unfortunately, because she's an accountant, it's with publishing, it's not as busy leading up to the end of the year. With accounting, unfortunately, she's probably the busiest she's ever been, other than tax season.
no problem. So, what do you enjoy doing with the kids and family then? So, that's another thing that I think people are going to be interested in. Who are you outside of a writer?
Well, hanging out with the family, we like to do a lot of outdoors things, camping, hiking. Growing up in northern Minnesota, obviously outdoors and nature is a big thing for me.
Sure.
We like to barbecue. We like to hang out with the extended family. So, they got the cousins that they like to play with, and
Yeah.
really enjoy getting together with the bigger family. Just sort of riding around, taking walks up to the park. Like I said, hiking is a big thing. Um, Watching movies. My oldest is just started reading a lot, so
Sure.
reading to the baby is sort of a big deal for him now, and yeah.
It's amazing how quickly they pick up on that. So, my 5-year-old just began reading pretty regularly, and he loves reading to his little brother, too.
Uh-huh.
Hi, buddy.
So,
So, I'm sneaking there. So, last question, then I'll let you go because I know you've got things to do. Number one piece of advice for aspiring or current writers, poets, comic creators, etc. What would you tell them? Your number one piece of advice.
well, number one, I guess I'll sort of give it in two parts. Just keep writing, and no matter what you're writing, you don't have to. If you wanna, you don't always have to be working on that next big novel. If you're, writing your grocery list, hey, that's writing. Getting yourself out there and meeting people and networking, I think, is a big sort of thing. I mean, I can't tell you the valuable connections I've made at a convention.
Yeah.
Just sort of meeting people, meeting fans, meeting other writers is always a big deal. If you're going to participate, in conventions, I recommend always, seeing if you can sit in on a panel and be part of a discussion. That's another way to sort of get your name out there,
Makes
and
sense.
and connect with people. So that's sort of my big advice is to just keep writing and keep yourself out there.
Excellent. Well, thanks again for taking the time to talk with me today.
Yeah,
And I'm interested to see your future works. I'll put it on my blog and website, the stuff that you have and the stuff that's coming up.
great.
Anytime you release something, let me know. I'll be sure to give you a promo spot there so people can connect with it.
Okay.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, Josh, and nice to meet you boys.
All right. Wave.
And have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Have a Merry Christmas, you too.
Thank you very much. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.